The information presented is for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are not necessarily the opinions of any Daikin company. This information should not be confused for accounting, legal, medical, or other professional advice. Please seek advice from a qualified professional for any specific questions.
Welcome to the Accelerated HVAC Success Program. My name is Ben Middleton. I'm the National Sales Training Manager for the Goodman, Amana, and Daikin products. Today we're joined with Ruth King. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us. Ruth is an author, she's an educator, and she's all-around guru here in the HVAC industry. Ruth, how in the world did you get into the HVAC industry?
First, Ben, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I got into this industry by accident. I had a friend who I was going through MBA school with, and she was working with Service America back in the 80s. I mean, we're talking a long time ago. And they needed some help. And, you know, my financial background and my background's always been financials and business planning and implementation and that type of thing. And so I found a niche and spent about 18 months into it and then left it and never left the industry for 36, 37 years now. No, more than that. Almost 40.
So it's interesting, Ruth, you've written a lot of books. One of the books that I love that you wrote was Profit or Wealth, you know, as if it's a choice.
Yeah, it's not. That's the thing of the book.
But, you know, with the books that you've written, and you started off with HVAC TV, I think you were the first one doing a podcast before podcasts were cool, and really using technology. I know today you've already cloned yourself in AI and you have somebody that can answer questions for people. So you've always loved technology. But when I look at our industry, I've always said our industry has a little bit of a self-esteem crisis. There's a lot of contractors out there that, you know, it's a badge of honor on how horrible your life can be because they don't want to rip their customers off. And you and I were just talking before we got started, your rule number one, profit's not a dirty word. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. When I wrote the 101 dumb financial mistakes business owners make, that's number one, because it's not only our industry. There's a lot of people who think that profit is a really bad word. But if you don't earn a profit, if you don't make a profit, number one, you can't pay your employees anymore. You can't give them the tools they want. You can't give them the benefits they want. You can't, and I love, you know how much I love the word can't. Mm-hmm. But the reality is without profit, you can't give your employees the things that they deserve working for you and building a great culture and those types of things. You know, the question is, why do they think it's a bad word? Why do they have a self-esteem issue with respect to it? Because there are so many contractors who do really, really well and use their businesses as a tool. And as long as you're using your business as a tool to do what you want, then you're in a situation where profit, number one, is not a dirty word. Number two, you get a badge of esteem rather than negative esteem, so that you can look at it and say, hey, this is what I did as a result of helping, you know, so many people keep a roof over their heads and food on their table and give them really, really good place to work and those types of things. So, I mean, you can build a really phenomenal business. And when I look at it, you can either buy a job, mm-hmm. getting out on your own. If you want to work 60, 80 hours a week and have nothing to show for it in 30 years, go for it. Some of the hardest conversations I have when people say, come value my business, is somebody who's worked 60, 80 hours a week, has no maintenance agreements, has nothing to show for it. Their business is not worth anything. How do you retire?
Right.
You can't. Well, Social Security, living off your kids, you know, and stuff like that. But that's basically, why would you work for 30, 40, 50, 60 years and have nothing to show for your fruits of your labor? To me, that doesn't make sense.
I know when I was on the wholesale side, it was always interesting to me. There were a couple of people that would stop by to pick up equipment, and they were in their 70s, still loading a new unit in the back of a pickup truck and going out and doing the install. And the fact of the matter was they couldn't retire.
Yeah.
And to your point, when somebody's put 30, 40, 50 years into an industry, it would make sense for them to have something to show for it.
You would hope.
You know, it's been interesting in the last, we're really in an interesting time, I think, in our industry. We had significant inflation. There was a lot of costs that went up, and not just in the HVAC industry, but in the grocery store and everywhere else. And so that had an impact on pricing, but we also had extremely high demand, higher demand than we've had in the past. And now we're kind of turning a corner. The demand is shifting. And, when you have that tremendous growth and people that are pricing using a multiplier or divisor method, those people have just saying, hey, I'm profitable. We're making tons of money. Life is great. It's wonderful. What kind of rude awakenings do you think some folks may be in that have not paid attention to their financials, and now that all of this is shifting and changing?
Yeah. Those people who went through Hurricane Andrew or Hurricane Hugo or some of the tornadoes don't look at it like this, because they had 2 or 3 years of boom time and then it died for like 5 years. So COVID did really good things for us from a perspective of everybody was home, they had the money to spend and that type, and they did. So some of our demand shifted to the COVID years from now. So we have to be very careful about that, number one. But I literally had a conversation last week with an $8 million contractor whose net profit per hour was $16 an hour. He had 25,000, and we think about 25,000 billable hours. And his net profit per hour was $16. I mean, I can work in a fast food restaurant for $16 an hour.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not going to use his expletives. We are, we have a clean podcast here. But it was like it was his wake-up call. It's not the percentage. It's really, you have to know for every billable hour how much drops to the bottom line, and that's your net profit per hour. And I've seen it over and over and over again, and contractors have $1, $2, $5 until they get, oh my gosh, why am I working this hard and have my employees working this hard and we're making this little money? It's not the percentage.
Right.
Because I can show you 2 contractors, one who had $10, they both had 10% nets, one who was earning about $50 net profit per hour, and one who was earning about 10. Which would you rather be?
Right.
I'd rather be the 50. I don't know about you, but
Absolutely.
So we generate revenue not through service, not through replacement, not through maintenance. We generate revenue through billable hours, which produce the service, the replacement, and all that sort of fun stuff. But it is actually billable hours and maximizing those billable hours that gives us our profitable bottom line. And if those guys have the badge and say, I don't have to be profitable, sure, let them work for $1 an hour net profit. Once they look at it that way, then they're going to go, do I really want to be working for $1 an hour? And then some of them will do something about it and some of them won't.
All right, so we've been talking a little bit about divisor, multiplier, and we've been talking about net profit per hour. In a nutshell, for somebody that's just hearing this terminology for the first time, what in the world is net profit per hour?
It says for every billable hour, how many dollars drop to the bottom line. Most of us, and me included, used to teach the divide by 1 minus the gross margin. And about 2004, 2005, I had a group of contractors I was working with. They all had about the same gross margins. And then some were doing really well and some of them weren't. And like this light bulb, blinding flash, the obvious comes out. And when you divide by 1 minus the gross margin, you forget about overhead. And so overhead is really, really critical. So if we just take our P&L and flip it, we start with what net profit per hour we want. We add what overhead cost per hour we need. That gives us our gross profit per hour. We add our direct costs, and then we have our revenue per hour. And you can do that for service rates. You can multiply by however many hours you're going to have if you're going to do a replacement or something like that. And it really and truly looks at the world from a very different perspective. And for those of you out there who are not, first time you've heard this is a very different way of thinking. And it took me a couple of years to get the group of contractors that I work with to even, some of them grasped it right away. Some of them, it took a while, but once they all did, they'll never go back to pricing the other way. And I'll tell you exactly why. One of my clients is just commercial, no residential, commercial, new construction, commercial replacement projects, service and maintenance. And his 2 new construction crews finished a job in the fall. And they had nothing major on the books until spring. So what do? You lay them off. Guess what? They're good guys. They're going somewhere.
Right.
You suffer through 6 months of no profit. That's another issue. almost no revenue and all this expense. So believe it or not, this public works job came up. Started November, December, early December, late November timeframe. I don't remember exactly when. Went till spring. We had to get this job. So we knew their overhead costs per hour. We knew the hours on the job, or we estimated it. We knew their costs. We knew the material costs. The only thing we didn't know was net profit per hour. And we went back and forth about, because we only needed to break even on this job to keep them, gainfully employed for 6 months. We bid it at $5 net profit per hour, knowing that everybody else was going to use markups or divisors or something along those lines. So they got the job. When we job costed it, it came in at 6. So my point there is, once you know how low you can really go, and it's not a percentage, it's an actual dollar number, you have so many choices. You can go really low, you can go really high, depending upon seasonality, depending upon what you want. And so those guys say, I don't want to make a profit. Fine. How much profit do you want to earn? Do you want to make at least as what you can make in a fast food restaurant, or are you happy with $1 an hour? It's their choice at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think one thing we didn't say is, how do you do this?
Right.
Minor detail, right? So we take, to get overhead costs per hour, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
What you'll do is you take your total overhead, let's say for last year, and divide it by the number of billable hours you had. And that's your overhead cost per hour. And if you're departmentalized, you can departmentalize it. And then net profit per hour is your total net profit for last year divided by your billable hours. Mm-hmm. And that's where that $8 million contractor almost had a cow. I'm only making $16 an hour. Yeah, you are. Well, it's time to do something about that. He wasn't happy with $16 an hour. I wouldn't be.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the questions that comes up a lot. Well, how much should I make per, net profit per hour? And that, I know you've answered that question many times.
Yeah, and it's like, I do not own your business.
Right.
I do not have the loans. I do not have my name on your trucks or your door or anything like that. You have to figure out what you're comfortable with. And the best way to do is start where you are. Job costs some jobs with your overhead costs per hour. And then if you don't like it, then raise it. A lot of the contractors, the national average for service, and national average, is around $75 an hour for residential service. That means in Waco, Texas, it's lower. In Palm Springs, California, it's higher. So, if you want to start there, that's fine. If your overhead cost per hour is like $60 or higher, you're probably not going to want a $75 net profit per hour, because it's going to price you out of the market. So you want to get your overhead costs per hour under 60, preferably under 40 for service, under 30 for replacement, and if you're new construction, it should be under 20. And those numbers are pretty much there. It's just, what do you want to add on the bottom line after you get your overhead cost per hour where it needs to be? And that's really the basis for everything. Once you know how much overhead you have to add, everything else becomes a multiplier. It's not even a multiplier divisor. It's add up, and makes life easy.
Well, I remember you had one contractor that called you up and said, hey, I just made over $100 net profit per hour. What should I do?
Yeah. Well, he was the contractor who said he wanted to earn 20 when he started. And he goes, I don't believe I did this. And I said, okay. So he said, I can actually do this now. And it was like the light bulb went on. Mm-hmm. The really cool part about that contractor was he was able to give a nice donation to his favorite charity, and he did. And he really learned a really good lesson, because everybody in his company, and most of the contractors I work with, they do bonuses based on net profit per hour. So everybody is focused not on a percentage, not on, how are we doing? And they give away a percentage of the net profit per hour every year. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes, good years, bad years. We've had both. And during the COVID years, those bonuses were pretty high.
Yeah.
They were pretty high. And I got a call one day, do you know how much bonus is going to be? Yes, so what? Do you know how much you're making?
So a lot of our listeners may be wondering, I think it's intimidating, because so often in these conversations, people talk about, you've got these different categories when we talk about accounting, right? You've got total sales, and you got cost of goods sold, and that gives you your gross profit, and then you have your operating expense. Cost of goods sold and operating expense sometimes can get muddy. Where do I put in the operating expense and where do I put in the cost of goods sold? Do you have any rules of thumb or any advice that you can give if somebody's trying to look at their financials and they're just trying to figure out what was my operating expense last year so that I can get to this number?
So the only thing I care about with respect to there, because really what matters is the net profit per hour.
Right.
So there are some contractors who put everything up in cost of goods sold, and there are some who put it all in operating expenses. The only thing that has to go in cost of goods sold is labor to do the jobs. And sometimes I see accountants trying to make it easy for them to do taxes. Not a good idea. Do your books so that you can run your business as well. And so you absolutely need to have materials, labor, equipment, commissions, freight, and those types of things in cost of goods sold.
Right.
If they're in overhead expenses, you have to move them up. And some put truck expenses in there, some put training expenses in there. I don't care as long as you've got the majority of things in there and the bottom line is the bottom line. Their gross margins, their gross profits and their gross margins are going to be slightly lower because they have all that more expense in there and their overhead costs are going to be slightly less. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is still the bottom line. So I've seen contractors who've had quote unquote 60% gross margins and still have a 20% net or a 15% net. I've seen contractors with a 30% gross margin and have a 20% net. It doesn't matter. If you look at that from that perspective, what matters is for every billable hour, how much drops to the bottom line. And when you flip the P&L upside down, which is a misnomer for a lot of people, especially in the beginning, then they start making money.
Sure.
And they really do. I can't tell you how many contractors have said, "I'm finally making money now. I finally get it." And when we're doing the trainings now, we're doing net profit per hour. So we're going to educate a whole lot of Daikin dealers and everything like that on this is the way you really should be pricing this.
Well, isn't that the difference of being proactive and reactive in a business?
Yes.
By flipping it upside down, you can actually be proactive in what you're doing.
Well, you get choices because if you're having a slower time period, which we all do in this industry, I mean, hopefully most of us are not weather dependent, we're weather driven. But we still have dependence on the weather or a COVID or something along those lines. And if you can go down to $5 net profit per hour, you can drop your pricing so that you're at least making $5 net profit per hour. You're keeping everybody busy. The profit's there. You're not going to do it when it's busy. But, you have a choice to keep everybody busy rather than lose money.
Right. So there's some big bucket categories typically in operating expense. You have your plant and equipment. So that's going to be pretty stable, pretty steady. You're going to have your rent and your utility bills and stuff that goes along with that. Then you have your administrative wages.
Right.
That's going to be fairly consistent. That's not going to move a whole lot. You have your vehicle expenses. Now that can be variable.
Right. Sometimes that goes up in cost of goods sold because contractors, and some do, and I never say one's right or wrong. They say if I have a tech or I have an installer, the truck goes with the installer and the tech. So that to me is a cost of goods sold. So, that's fine. If that's the way you want to do it, it's perfectly okay.
But one of probably the biggest variables and one of the issues that I think a lot of contractors have is when it comes to the marketing expense side of things. How much should a contractor spend on marketing is the $1 million question.
I don't have a marketing budget, and I think you read my contractor sense the other day. The reality is you've got to find something that works, all right? I had a contractor who had a $5,000 budget to do postcard and social media around those postcards. It ended up costing him $11,000, and he was complaining, I won't use the term he used, about the fact that it cost him $11,000. I said, well, how much did you generate? Well, north is 70,000 and we're still, generating more money from this. And I said, well, why don't you spend another 11? And the light bulb went on.
Right.
So it's, the marketing expense is really dependent upon how much you generate from marketing. It's not the expense itself. I look at it as an investment. And if you invest $1,000, do you get enough to at least break even? And the Ruth rule on that is if you invest $1,000 and your gross margin's 40%, you have to get $2,500 in revenue to break even.
Sure.
So that's what I would look at. And yes, marketing is the most variable piece of overhead, because if you're doing it right, you don't have a budget and you're spending $1,000 to get $2,500, or you're spending $1,000 to get $5,000. Why wouldn't you keep doing that?
But I don't think typically people don't look at marketing as an investment and looking at the ROI, right?
Yeah.
Typically people look at marketing, well, I don't have this money. And the other big fallacy that I've heard from a lot of contractors is, well, my manufacturer gives me this marketing budget. We have accrual funds available for all of our contractors. And so with this marketing budget that I have, that's what I got to spend. And I mean, that's just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at that and say, okay, find something that has worked, or talk to somebody who's not necessarily your competitor down the street. But there's so many ways to talk to dealers who've done really cool marketing and really good marketing and gotten really, really good results. What did they do? Will it work in your neighborhood? I've got a contractor that I work with in California, and the month of February, we have literally tried everything in about 5 years. I mean, everything I knew to build up sales in February, we tried at one point. We just decided, because nothing was working, we weren't getting the ROIs on it. And we just said, okay, February is going to be a really bad month. We budget February to be a really bad month. We budget February to lose money. And the first year we did it, he said to me, I lost money this month. Yes, you did, because we budgeted for it. We weren't going to try and waste any more money because it wasn't giving us the return on investment. So there may be months that are like that. It's the only time and only contractor that I know of in that area that we haven't been able to make something work. And we've tried. Most of the time you can do things with your maintenance clients, because they'll listen to you and they'll generally do things in slower times of the year if you give them a reason to. But even their maintenance clients basically went to sleep. I have no idea why, but we just said, okay, this is what February is going to look like. Tough. We'll just, unfortunately have to make it up in other months, and we do.
So let's talk about another concept that comes up in the industry a lot, at least when I'm talking with contractors, the idea of a loss leader. I'm gonna give away my tune-ups on the hope that we're gonna get some other income that's gonna come in, or I'm going to potentially even give away this install. We're gonna do it at a break even, or maybe even
less.
at a loss. Yes, because we know we're gonna get future business out of it. And I've heard contractors all the time, especially when you start talking to people that have, that landlord business or that commercial property. Well, they have 1,000 properties, so we're gonna just get our foot in the door. What do you think when somebody starts coming to you and saying, hey, I'm going to do this loss leader?
No, you're not. That's my answer. No, you're not. You're going to at least break even on it. And think about it this way. If you have 1,000 maintenance agreements and you lose $10 on every maintenance agreement because you want to, quote unquote, be the cheapest in the area. So that's 1,000 times 10, that's $10,000 loss. It's not $10,000 you have to make up if your net profit, and this is the only time I'm going to use a percentage, so is 10%, you've got to generate $100,000 to make up that $10,000 loss. It's not only loss. It's like when somebody finds out that their bookkeeper had been embezzling, $50,000, $100,000. I've seen $1 million, and 10%. Well, that's $10 million in the door that you have to bring in just to pay for that embezzlement. It's not only the money; it's what you have to generate to make up the money. So there's nothing you should do that's a loss leader. We are not a supermarket.
Right.
I mean, if supermarket wants to have milk all the way in the back and all the way, so you have to go through and go, I need one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these. How many times with milk as a loss leader do you walk out with just milk?
Right.
You don't. I mean, come on. You just don't. So I don't believe in loss leaders. I think if you want to just break even like we did with that commercial contractor, that's fine. We did it for a very specific reason, but know how low you can go.
So you have a book, 101 Dumb Financial Mistakes Business Owners Make. I love the title. We talked about the very first one. What are some of your favorite stories out of the book that really stick with you and that you love to share with contractors?
The book is divided into what I call general financial mistakes, and then some that are marketing, some that are operational. and some that are actually financial. I mean, one of them is that you can have, quote unquote, the lost leaders. We've actually talked about a bunch of them during this conversation. The thing is that if you don't have inventory on your balance sheet, it's one of my favorite one. And I know a lot of our viewers are going, ugh. But if you don't have inventory on your balance sheet, your cost of goods sold is higher than it needs to be. Your profits are lower than they need to be. And if you have any intention of selling your business, your profit is lower than it should be, and you're going to get less for it. Now, do you think a buyer is going to tell you to put inventory on your balance sheet? Of course not.
Right.
They want to pay less. But if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 crews touching inventory, you need to actually have it on your balance sheet and have your warehouse locked up and have ins and outs. I mean, barcoding these days is so easy. It really and truly is. I mean, could you run the Daikin plant without barcoding?
No.
There's no way. And it's very easy. There's lots of really cheap and expensive things that are out there that you can use. And you'll know your true profitability. You'll know your true gross margins. And that's probably one of the biggest one that contractors hate. But once they do it, they realize, oh my gosh, number one, we don't want anybody stealing from them. But number two is we know where we really are from a profit perspective and can make good decisions at that point.
Hey, you wrote another book and you told stories about contractors and, all of there were horror stories, really.
Yeah, it was the ugly
happened.
truth about cash. It was, 50 ways employees and vendors can steal from you and what you can do about it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the 101 Dumb Mistakes, at the end of the first book, I promised to write a second one with all the new ways that people are stealing. And so I put it at the end of this one. One of which is with those squares, the little swiper thingies. We had a service technician who got a square with the company's federal ID number, which is on the bottom of your W-2s, or, your 10,
right.
Whatever we get at the end of the year, W-2s, I think. And state ID, federal ID, unemployment ID, had it all, and named the company, his checking account. So the customers would give him a credit card, and he would swipe it with his square, and it would go into his account. And the customer thinks she paid because it has the company's name on the receipt. So the owner is looking at his weekly cash flow reports, and there were accounts receivable behind it, which is one of the things owners should do every month or every week. And he notices that Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Smith and Mrs. White, so that they have receivables, which doesn't make sense because they're a COD residential company. So he calls Mrs. Jones on the phone and says, is everything okay? Did the service tech do his job? Da-da-da-da. And he said, did you happen to pay the tech? And she said, oh, yeah, I paid by credit card. He didn't say, why didn't you pay the bill?
Right.
He wanted to know what was going on. And he said, would you mind sending me a copy of the receipt? No, sure, no problem. Take a picture of it with your phone, send it in. It takes 2 seconds to do. And he found this with a number of them. So I don't know what the tech was thinking, but he caught him within 2 weeks. It was about $4,000 total. And he spent, I can't remember how many years in jail he spent because there were 7 federal counts, wire fraud, name theft. I mean, all the federal counts that they could throw at him for $4,000. I mean, why are you doing this?
Right.
But so the thing is that everybody who's got a swiper thing in the field, I don't know, everybody's got their own, but just make sure they don't have a square on top of it.
Well, and inventory walks away. Mm-hmm. People doing side jobs.
Oh yeah. One of the really cool, and it's not in any of the books. This just happened. Mrs. Jones calls the company on a Saturday, and the owner happened to be there, and she says, I have your tech installing at my house, and he said, can I have your name and everything else like that? No record of Mrs. Jones. So I'll be right out there. So he calls the service manager and says, meet me at the office. We're going to go get a truck. Mm-hmm. And so they go to Mrs. Jones's home, fire the tech, take the truck, and let him deal with it because there's no side jobs.
Right.
Yeah. So he got what he deserved.
What are some other favorite stories that you have from that book?
Oh my gosh, favorite stories. The marketing pieces are really important. I told one of my major favorite marketing stories, but never spend marketing dollars without really thinking how much revenue do I have to generate to break even? Because a lot of times, somebody will come and say, that's a really good idea, or I saw, one of my competitors doing this, or, whatever else it is. Go figure it out for yourself. You know what your margins are, and you know how much you have to generate to break even. And so the Ruth rules are all in the book to be able to do that. So some of those marketing stories are fun. Bonuses, making sure that you take care of your employees because they're the ones who are really generating the revenue for you. And when you become bottom line oriented and they understand profitability, you'll get better. The surprising thing about that is that once they understand that and you hire the wrong person, they'll kick them out. Because it's affecting their money and affecting their bottom line. And it's like, we never thought that was going to happen. It did. I mean, you don't have to worry about hiring a bad apple anymore. They'll get rid of them for lack of productivity, which is kind of cool. It's the fun thing to do. Something we never even thought about from that perspective. And then we look at it, making sure that your managers are managing by KPIs. And there's general ones in the book. My KPIs from an HVAC perspective in terms of revenue per truck, net profit per hour, how many maintenance agreements they actually enroll, and sometimes we take it away from the techs and give it to the office. So those are the types of KPIs. Warehouse KPIs would be inventory days under 30 days, making sure that we don't have financial statement fruit salad, i.e. revenue in one month, expense in another month, so that your gross margins go up and down like a yo-yo. So, those types of KPIs are all in the book, and it's really important to do all of those. Communications is really important, making sure nobody can read your mind. That is one of I think that's number 2, is that your employees can read your mind. They can't. Right. You want the phone answered a certain way. If you have a problem with somebody, you have to tell them because they don't know what's in your head. And those are the types of things that are really important. So, there's 101 of them. Thank you, clients, for giving me all the stories.
Ruth, you've been working with contractors for many years now, and one of the things that you do is you have your groups that get together, and so just different contractors being able to hold each other accountable and to walk through and what's interesting is people will raise their hand and say, yes, I want to be in a group. And then all of a sudden they find out that they're going to have to provide financial statements every month and it becomes real. What are some of the benefits that you've seen for some of the contractors that have stuck with? I think you've got some clients that have been with you over 20 years that have been providing the financials.
My longest client started with me in 1987 and sold his business in 2021. And I helped him sell it because it was time for him really to go. It really, he's doing really well now. He's happy and everything like that. My group is very small. I keep it small because I look at it, I get their financials every single month, and they have to be profitable. At some point, we get them profitable. But the reality is it's so small. It's small, and they all share, and there's no competitors in that group. And it's something that we've had, some of them sell their businesses for, tens of millions as a result of it. Some of them want to pass it down to the next generation. Why not pass down a good business? And some of them, I've watched them grow out of their man cave and, now buy a piece of land to be able to build a building on because they've grown to the point that's there. And they all grow profitably. They all grow with net profit per hour. And the group is like, has anybody done this? And everybody shares. Nobody's going to give them a story or whatever else it is like that because they know I'll get on them because I know them all really well. So that's what Profitability Group is all about. And it's very small, non-competitive. And I've had to say no to a lot of contractors over the years simply because there's somebody in the group who's their competitor. And sorry, it is what it is. But I do a lot of training, do a lot of writing. There's a lot of stuff online now, which, think about it. When we started in the 90s, there wasn't a whole lot of online. I think, as you said, we were probably the first to do it.
Right.
And most of the classes, dispatcher class and a lot of financials and things like that are online, which they weren't years ago. And, you don't have to travel and you can just get it and do it. But you got to do it. That's the key.
So, that's a whole new level of networking. One of the interesting phenomena that I've seen happen, we just came back from a big industry trade show that we were at last week, but you'll see a group of contractors that get together. One contractor goes, yep, it's really slow. I'm not getting any business. Another contractor says, yep, it's really slow for me. I'm not getting any business. And then the other contractor says, well, I'm trying this new marketing program, and I wrote this ad. And the other contractor say, hey, can you send me a copy of that? You're both telling us how you have no business, and yet you're trading ideas of how to continue having no business.
Yeah, exactly.
What I love about your accountability aspect is you're making sure that it's not just somebody coming out there and either spitballing and saying, hey, I think this is a great concept, but you actually have the proof behind, yes, I did this, we tried it, and these are the results that we actually saw in our area.
Occasionally when something new comes in, I say, okay, who wants to be a guinea pig?
Right.
And we do that, and several of the group members generally say, okay, I'll be the guinea pig for this, and then they all share the results. Sometimes they're abysmal, and then word gets out that you don't want to do this. But sometimes they're really, really good, and then more of them do it at that particular point. So they're willing to take chances. They're willing to share the results, good and bad, because there's no competitors in the room. None, zero, nada. So they don't have to worry about somebody down the street, taking that idea or whatever it is. So that's the group. It's pretty much now through referral coming into the group, which is an interesting way to have it. But, if you can't get in the group, there's lots of different ways that, take class, read a book.
Sure.
Things like that.
So it seems to me you're probably, just like you were leading edge with HVAC TV, you're kind of leading edge as figuring out how to implement AI into this industry. Mm-hmm. Tell me, what are you doing with AI right now? Where do you see AI going? How do you see it impacting the industry as a whole?
It's interesting to see where AI is going to be. I mean, we are in such a very birth state, years one, years two. Right now, you can actually write your own job descriptions. I mean, I had a job description manual, which is now obsolete. You go into ChatGPT-4 and you say, I need a job description for da-da-da. This person's doing X, Y, Z, A, B, and C. Write me a job description. In 5 seconds, you have a job description. I need help with an outline for this. And then you flush out the outline. So, I mean, there's a lot of the text writing things that are there. I know XOI is doing a lot of things with AI with respect to things that they're doing. Mm-hmm. I know that Interplay Learning's doing a lot. I mean, the training piece of it, I don't get involved in. Mine is more of the oversight, the management, and things like that. In some of the financial things that we're doing right now with Financially Fit Business, the next phase is actually implementing AI with it. And we're working on that right now. And we have to develop our own because we have looked worldwide and nobody can do it. So we're going to be the first, which will be fun. Be out next year.
That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to have you back here to talk about that as you get ready with that. That'll be exciting to see what happens with that.
My program is we're so frustrated because we talk to everybody and go, oh, we can do that. And then we dig deeper and ask the right questions. They can't. Small business is messy. It's not like a Fortune 500 company where everything is pristine and audited and stuff like that. They can do things for audited things because they are consistent. They can't do it for a small business because all of our P&Ls and balance sheets don't look the same. You or I can look at one and we can do it intuitively. The hardest thing I had to do was write a 50-page manual and get what's in my head out on paper so AI can learn.
Right.
And that was hard. That was really hard. But it's there.
It's exciting. Do you have anything else that you want to share with our audience?
Implement whatever you heard about in this podcast. Go figure out what your overhead cost per hour is. If you don't like the number, figure out, increase your billable hours, decrease your number of hours that they're not billable, decide what net profit per hour you want, go for it. But, take the ideas and concepts that we've talked about and use them. Profit is not a dirty word. Profit is something you need so that you have a tool that will give you the life that you want.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And for those of you that are out there, please, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and like it. Also, please go ahead and follow us so you can see upcoming shows that we have with our guests and our speakers. Ruth, we look forward to having you here again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.